moment I pulled into the driveway of my rental property, my stomach dropped. The once pristine front lawn was littered with children's toys, and there was a bizarre collection of lawn ornaments I definitely hadn't approved. 3 months ago, I'd rented my beloved family home to a woman named Karen Walters, who had seemed perfect on paper. Great credit score, stable job as an office manager, and impressive references. Little did I know those references were probably just her friends playing pretend. I should have known something was off when she asked if the neighbors were nosy during the final walkthrough. My inspection today wasn't random. The neighbors had been calling non-stop about noise complaints, unauthorized pets, and what they described as suspicious late-night activity. As a landlord of 15 years, I've learned to hope for the best but prepare for the worst. That's why I had installed small, legal security cameras in the common areas of the house after my last tenant left. They were disclosed in the lease agreement, which Karen had signed without even asking questions. I knocked on the door and waited. No answer. I knocked again, louder this time. Finally, I heard movement inside, followed by an irritated voice. "Who is it?" "I'm busy." "It's Mark, your landlord. I sent you an email about today's inspection." I kept my voice polite, but firm. The door swung open, and there stood Karen in a bathrobe at 2 in the afternoon, her face twisted in annoyance. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and she was clutching a mug that read, "It's not a bad attitude, it's my personality." "Oh, that. I thought that was optional," she said, making no move to let me in. "Optional? What part of required quarterly inspection sounds optional?" "I'm afraid it's not. It's in the lease agreement, section 12. I need to check the property for maintenance issues." I smiled professionally. "It shouldn't take more than 30 minutes. Karen rolled her eyes dramatically. "Fine, but make it quick. I'm working from home today." She stepped aside, and the smell hit me immediately. A mixture of cigarette smoke, dirty laundry, and something that could only be described as animal urine? My lease explicitly prohibited smoking indoors and unauthorized pets. I had approved one cat when she moved in, but this smell suggested a whole menagerie. I took a deep breath through my mouth and stepped inside. The living room was barely recognizable. My furnished rental had included a tasteful gray sectional, coffee table, and entertainment center. Now the sectional was pushed against the wall at an odd angle, covered in what appeared to be food stains. The coffee table was nowhere to be seen, replaced by a folding table covered in nail polish bottles and fast food wrappers. "I rearranged a bit," Karen said, noticing my expression. "The feng shui was all wrong before." "Feng shui? This looks more like a tornado hit." "I see." I made a note on my clipboard. "Karen, my lease agreement states that furniture cannot be moved without permission, and the property must be kept in a clean, sanitary condition." She waved her hand dismissively. "It's clean enough. And I'm the one living here, so I should be able to arrange things how I want." I continued my inspection, each room revealing new horrors. The kitchen had dirty dishes piled high, cabinet doors hanging open, and what appeared to be burn marks on the countertop. The guest bathroom had black mold growing in the shower that had clearly been ignored for weeks, but it was when I reached the master bedroom that I nearly lost my composure. The beautiful hardwood floors I had refinished just before she moved in had been completely covered with adhesive peel-and-stick tiles in a garish geometric pattern, and they weren't even applied properly. Many were already peeling up at the corners. "Karen, what happened to the floors?" I asked, struggling to keep my tone neutral. She shrugged. "I didn't like the wood, too old-fashioned. These are much more modern." "Modern? They look like something from a discount bin at a liquidation store." "This is a major, unauthorized modification to the property," I explained patiently. "The lease clearly states that no alterations can be made without written approval." "Oh, please," she scoffed. "They're just stick-on tiles. It's not like I knocked down a wall." As if on cue, I heard a bark from the closet. Then another. I looked at Karen, whose expression had suddenly turned defensive. "Is that a dog?" I asked. "It's an emotional support animal," she replied quickly. "You can't discriminate against me for having one. I know my rights." I opened the closet door to find not one but 3 small dogs in a makeshift pen. They looked up at me, tails wagging hopefully. The closet floor was lined with puppy pads, most of which needed changing. Karen, even emotional support animals require proper documentation and approval, and 3 dogs would still exceed the pet limit for this property. I was beginning to feel a headache coming on. She crossed her arms. Well, no one else has complained. Only you seem to have a problem with how I live. That's when I noticed something on her dresser that made my blood run cold. A small dome-shaped object that I recognized immediately as one of my security cameras. It had been removed from the hallway ceiling. "Did you remove the security camera?" I asked, already knowing the answer. Karen smirked. "Those are an invasion of privacy. I took them all down the day after I moved in. I know that's illegal, even if you did mention them in the lease. It's actually not illegal at all, and removing them is a lease violation." Actually, Karen, security cameras in common areas are perfectly legal as long as they're disclosed, which they were. Section 23 of your lease specifically mentions them and prohibits tampering with security devices. My voice was calm, but inside I was seething. "Where are the other cameras?" "I threw them away," she said with a shrug. "They were creepy." What Karen didn't know was that the cameras were wireless and cloud-connected. They'd continued recording up until the moment she removed them, and had captured every lease violation along the way. The smoking indoors, the unauthorized pets, the damage to the property, all of it was documented. I finished my inspection in silence, cataloging every violation. The unauthorized painting of the second bedroom in a dark purple, the satellite dish bolted to the roof without permission, the broken dishwasher that she'd apparently tried to fix herself, resulting in water damage to the cabinet below. When we returned to the living room, Karen seemed to sense that things weren't going her way. She switched tactics, her voice suddenly becoming syrupy sweet. "Look, I know the place isn't perfect right now. I've been meaning to clean up, I've just been so busy with work, you know how it is." She smiled in what I assumed she thought was a charming manner. "Maybe we could work something out?" "I'll be sending a formal notice of lease violations," I said professionally. "You'll have 14 days to remedy the issues according to state law." Her smile disappeared instantly. "Are you kidding me? Over a few dogs and some redecorating? Do you know how hard it is to find rentals these days? I always pay my rent on time." Actually, she had been late twice in 3 months, but I didn't bother pointing that out. "I'm simply enforcing the terms of the lease you signed," I explained. "The cameras you removed captured evidence of multiple violations before you tampered with them." Her face went through a fascinating transformation as the implications hit her. "Cameras? What do you mean they captured? Wait, you mean they were recording before I took them down?" Did she really think security cameras don't record? "Yes, that's generally what security cameras do." I couldn't keep a hint of sarcasm from my voice. "They recorded the unauthorized pets, the smoking indoors, the parties that damaged the property." "You can't prove that was me," she said quickly, but her confident demeanor was cracking. "The footage shows you quite clearly, Karen, and removing the cameras was itself a serious violation." She began pacing. "This is ridiculous. I'll sue you for invasion of privacy. You can't just spy on your tenants. I'll call my cousin, he's almost a lawyer." "Almost a lawyer? What does that even mean?" "All the cameras were in common areas, not bedrooms or bathrooms, and were disclosed in the lease, but if you want to pursue legal action, that's your right." I headed toward the door. "You'll receive the formal notice by certified mail within 48 hours. What followed was 2 weeks of escalating drama. Karen ignored the notice of violations completely. Instead, she began a campaign of harassment, calling me multiple times a day with trivial complaints. The neighbor's tree was too close to her window. The mail carrier was suspiciously slow delivering her packages. The tap water tasted municipal. I documented everything while beginning the eviction process. The final straw came when she called at 2 in the morning, claiming there was an urgent plumbing emergency. I rushed over, concerned about potential water damage, only to find her waiting with a list of improvements she demanded for the property, including new appliances and central air conditioning. "There's no emergency, is there?" I asked, looking around the perfectly dry kitchen. Well, the emotional emergency of living in an outdated house is real, she replied with a straight face. And since you're here, we might as well discuss my needs as a tenant. I left without a word and called my attorney the next morning. With the documentation of lease violations, the security footage from before she removed the cameras, and now the false report of an emergency, we had more than enough for an eviction. The day of the eviction hearing arrived. I brought my evidence neatly organized: photos from the inspection, screenshots from the security footage, records of complaints from neighbors, and a timeline of events. Karen showed up 20 minutes late, demanding the judge wait for her almost lawyer cousin who was stuck in traffic. The judge was unimpressed, as the evidence mounted, including the clear video footage of Karen's smoking indoors, bringing in multiple unauthorized pets, and damaging the property during what appeared to be a wild party. Her face grew increasingly pale. "Your Honor, I had no idea those cameras were actually recording," she said, as if this was a valid defense. The judge peered at her over his glasses. "Mrs. Walters, ignorance of how cameras function is not a legal defense. They were disclosed in your lease, which you signed." When the judge announced his decision in my favor, including an order for Karen to vacate the property within 7 days and pay for damages, her mouth fell open in genuine shock. For perhaps the first time, the reality of her actions seemed to hit her. "But where am I supposed to go in 7 days?" she stammered. "With 3 dogs? That's not enough time." "You should have considered that before violating your lease agreement," the judge replied without sympathy. "The court finds the landlord has been more than patient, given the circumstances." As we left the courtroom, Karen's shock turned to anger. She stormed up to me in the hallway. "This isn't over. You'll regret this. Do you know how hard it is for a single woman to find housing these days?" I maintained my professional demeanor. "I'm sorry it came to this, Karen, but actions have consequences." "Consequences?" she sputtered, her face turning an alarming shade of red. "I'll show you consequences. I still have 7 days in that house, and you'll see what I can do in 7 days." That threat was all I needed. I immediately returned to the courthouse and filed for an emergency order based on her threat of retaliatory damage to the property. 2 hours later, a judge granted it, and by that evening, a sheriff's deputy was escorting Karen off my property while she screamed about tenant rights and her almost lawyer cousin. As the deputy handed her the final eviction papers, I watched her face crumple with the realization that her games had finally caught up with her. For one brief moment, genuine fear replaced the entitlement in her eyes. "But my things, my dogs, where am I supposed to go right now?" she asked, her voice suddenly small. "That's not the landlord's problem, ma'am," the deputy said firmly. "You have 30 minutes to collect essential personal belongings. The rest can be retrieved during scheduled times next week." Karen stood frozen on the sidewalk, phone in hand, desperately texting someone, probably the mythical almost lawyer cousin, as the reality of immediate eviction finally sank in. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water, but for once, no entitled demands came out. Funny how fast knowing your rights turns into "please help me" when the law doesn't actually support your behavior.